It was 2:47 a.m. when Evelyn Carter's headlights cut through the endless stretch of fog. She'd driven this rural highway 100 times after late hospital shifts, but that night, something about the silence felt wrong. Too heavy, too expectant. Her radio crackled. Her phone read, "No signal," and the rain began to fall in rhythmic whispers, as if the night itself was breathing. Then out of nowhere, a man appeared on the roadside, drenched, trembling, eyes wild with terror. Evelyn slammed the brakes, heart racing, torn between fear and the instinct to help. When she rolled down her window, he leaned close enough for her to see his lips quivering. "Please," he gasped, voice breaking. "They're still in there." And before Evelyn could ask who, the woods behind him exhaled, long and deep, like something ancient had just woken up. The night was at its darkest hour, that strange hollow time when even the stars seemed to have fallen asleep. 2:47 a.m. Evelyn Carter gripped the steering wheel tighter, her tired eyes fixed on the lonely stretch of highway ahead. The rain had started as a soft drizzle, just enough to blur her vision, but it quickly thickened into sheets that shimmered under her headlights like silver ghosts. She'd just finished a 14-hour hospital shift. 2 emergency surgeries, a code blue, and a broken mother who wouldn't stop screaming her child's name. Nights like these drained everything from her, body, mind, soul. But she always told herself it was worth it. Saving people was her purpose. It made the exhaustion bearable. Yet tonight, as her car rolled along that endless ribbon of asphalt, something about the darkness felt heavier. Wrong. The radio crackled, breaking the silence for a moment. Her favorite old song, "Don't Take It All In," drifted through the speakers, warped by static. It was the kind of tune that used to make her feel safe when she drove home at night. But now, even the melody sounded eerie, stretched and distorted like it was being played in slow motion. Evelyn adjusted her mirror. The road behind her was empty. No headlights, no taillights, just blackness swallowing the distance. Her phone buzzed once. She reached for it only to see 2 words glowing faintly on the cracked screen. No signal. She sighed. Of course. The wipers squeaked back and forth, hypnotic in their rhythm. For a few minutes, all she heard was the rain tapping the roof and the low hum of her engine. She was starting to relax again, and when something flickered at the edge of her vision, a shadow, quick, human-shaped. Evelyn straightened in her seat, scanning the roadside. Nothing, just trees bending under the weight of rain. Her pulse quickened. "Get it together," she whispered to herself. "You're just tired." The fog thickened, swallowing the highway until it looked like her car was floating in nothing. The yellow lines beneath her tires began to blur. Then, a shape appeared. At first, she thought it was a signpost or a reflection. But as she drew closer, her stomach dropped. It was a man. He was standing right at the edge of the road, soaking wet, waving his arms desperately. Jesus. Evelyn gasped, slamming her foot on the brake. The tires screamed against the wet asphalt, her car jolting violently before stopping just a few feet away from him. Her heart pounded in her ears. She stared through the windshield, the man's face barely visible through the curtain of rain. He stumbled closer, illuminated by the glow of her headlights. He was maybe mid-30s, dressed in a soaked flannel shirt and jeans, mud smeared across his face. His lips trembled as he raised one hand. Evelyn lowered her window just an inch. "Sir, are you okay?" The man shook his head rapidly, his breath visible in the cold. His eyes weren't focused on her. They were darting toward the forest behind him, wide and terrified. "Please," he gasped, voice hoarse. "You have to help me." "They're still in there," Evelyn frowned. "Who's in there?" "My wife. And my son." His voice broke on the last word. "We crashed. Please, I can't. They're trapped. I need help." Her instincts screamed for her to lock the doors and drive away. This road was notorious for strange stories. Hitchhikers that vanished, cries in the fog, even a few disappearances. But she looked into his eyes, the kind of desperation she'd seen before. In ER waiting rooms, in people who had already lost too much. She reached for her first aid kit. "Show me where." The man nodded shakily and turned toward the woods. Evelyn stepped out into the rain, the cold instantly biting through her scrubs. Her car's headlights glowed behind her, casting long shadows on the mist. For a moment she glanced back. The beam of light looked like 2 watching eyes. Then she followed him into the trees. The forest swallowed the sound of her footsteps. The rain faded to a whisper. The world went still. Too still. Something about the night had changed, and deep down she knew. This wasn't a rescue. This was the beginning of something she should have never found. The forest swallowed them almost instantly. As soon as Evelyn and the stranger, Caleb he'd said his name was, stepped beyond the tree line, the night changed. The sound of the rain softened as though the canopy above had absorbed it. The air felt thicker, colder, alive in a way that made Evelyn's skin prickle. Her flashlight beam cut through the mist in trembling slices, illuminating wet leaves, gnarled roots, and the glint of raindrops clinging to branches like tiny eyes. Caleb walked ahead of her, his pace uneven, stumbling through the mud. Every few seconds he glanced over his shoulder, muttering under his breath. Evelyn could barely make out his words. Something about them, something about time running out. "Caleb," she called softly, trying to sound calm. "How far in did you crash?" He didn't turn. "Not far," he said, his voice shaking. "Just up ahead. You'll see it." The silence between them was suffocating. No insects, no wind, not even the sound of dripping water. The only thing she could hear was their footsteps and the faint crunch of broken branches beneath their shoes. After several minutes, the faint smell of gasoline drifted through the damp air. Evelyn's pulse quickened. "We're close," she whispered. Then she saw it. A wrecked SUV half wrapped around the trunk of a massive oak. Its headlights were dead, but steam still hissed from the cracked radiator. Evelyn rushed forward. Oh my God! The windshield was shattered inward. The metal bent and twisted, glass scattered like diamonds across the ground. She leaned in through the driver's side window. The seats were empty. No one was inside. No blood, no signs of injury, just emptiness, and a faint echo of what might have been a child's voice, distant, almost playful, fading into the trees. She turned sharply. "Caleb, where are they?" He stood a few feet behind her, staring blankly at the wreckage. His face had gone pale, lips trembling. "They were here," he said softly. "I heard them screaming. I pulled my wife out, she wasn't breathing, and then—" His voice cracked. "Then she was gone." Evelyn frowned. "Gone? You mean she walked off?" He shook his head slowly. "No, just gone." Her flashlight flickered. She tapped it, frustration mixing with fear. "Okay, we'll call for help." "There's no signal, but maybe—" She froze. On the muddy ground beside the SUV were footprints, small ones, a child's. They led away from the crash, disappearing deeper into the woods. Evelyn crouched, running her hand over them. The edges were sharp, the impressions still wet, fresh. "Caleb, look." She pointed. "Your son, he might still be alive." He didn't move. Didn't even look. His breathing grew shallow, and his eyes, they weren't focused on the prints. They were fixed on something else. Something behind her. Evelyn turned slowly. The trees were still. The fog hung low, heavy as a curtain. But she could feel it, and something out there, just beyond the reach of the light. Watching. "Caleb," she whispered. "We need to go back to the road. We'll bring help." He shook his head violently. No, it won't let us leave." "What won't?" Before she could finish, Caleb began whispering again, fast, frantic. The words weren't English anymore. They rolled off his tongue like an incantation, guttural and wet. "Caleb, stop," she said sharply. He didn't. He was talking to the dark. And then, through the fog, a faint flicker appeared. Light. Candlelight. It came from deeper within the forest. Pulsing like a heartbeat, Evelyn's breath hitched. "What is that?" Caleb turned toward it, his expression eerily calm now. "It's where they are," he said softly. "You'll see." And before she could stop him, he started walking toward the glow. Evelyn hesitated. Her every instinct screamed, "Run. Leave. Get back to the car." But the child's footprints led the same direction. Her conscience overpowered her fear. She followed. As she stepped deeper into the fog, the forest seemed to exhale, a long, low groan that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Behind her, the crash site vanished into the mist. Ahead of her, the flickering light grew brighter, drawing her toward it like a moth to a flame. Something whispered her name, faint, distant from the trees, and though her heart told her to turn back, Evelyn kept walking, because she was a nurse. And nurses don't run from cries in the dark, even when the dark starts whispering back. The deeper Evelyn followed Caleb into the forest, the more wrong the world began to feel. The fog clung to the trees like spider silk, glowing faintly under her flashlight. Every sound seemed stretched thin. Her own breathing, the wet crunch of leaves beneath her shoes, the soft creak of the trees shifting in the wind. The deeper they went, the more it felt like sound was being swallowed. Then the smell hit her, rot and candle wax. A strange, sour mix that burned her throat. Ahead, the trees opened into a clearing. And there, standing crooked and half-consumed by the forest, was an old wooden chapel. Its steeple leaned at an angle. The cross at the top snapped in half. Moss crawled up the sides of its faded planks. The windows were shattered, and behind them something flickered, a faint orange glow. Evelyn slowed, her heart pounding. "Caleb," she whispered, "what is this place?" But he didn't answer. He was already walking toward it. "Caleb, wait," she hissed. Her flashlight beam followed him as he stepped onto the warped wooden porch. The door hung half open, swaying gently. Every time it moved, the hinges groaned, a sound that made her teeth ache. He pushed it open and slipped inside. Evelyn stood at the threshold, gripping her flashlight so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her reflection stared back at her in one of the cracked window panes, pale, frightened, trembling, and yet, she stepped in. The air inside was thick, heavy with the smell of smoke and damp wood. Candles covered the pews, melted into rivers of wax that pooled on the floor. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them, all burned down to blackened stubs. At the far end of the chapel stood a crude altar, a wooden table covered in framed photographs. Evelyn approached slowly, her shoes sticking to the floor with every step. She picked up one of the photos. It was of a family, a man, a woman, and a little boy sitting in front of a Christmas tree. Their faces were scratched out, deep gouges across the paper, her stomach twisted. She picked up another, a young couple smiling on their wedding day. Faces scratched out again. Every photo was the same, smiling people erased, forgotten. On the wall behind the altar, faint words had been carved into the wood, shaky, uneven letters forming a single sentence. "We are remembered only when they see us." Evelyn's breath trembled. What the hell? Then a voice behind her whispered close to her ear, "They don't like it when you leave." Evelyn spun around, her flashlight trembling. Caleb stood in the doorway, dripping wet, his eyes wide and glassy. "Caleb," she said softly. "Who are they?" He smiled faintly, a strange, empty smile. "They said you'd come. They said you could help." Evelyn took a step back. "What are you talking about?" His head tilted slightly. "You help people, don't you? That's what you do." The candles around the room flickered violently. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting and moving, though nothing else did. Evelyn's breath came faster. Caleb stopped this, but he wasn't moving. The shadows were. They began to shift into shapes, that faint human outlines, thin and trembling. One of them stepped forward, and Evelyn saw a face within it. A woman's face, translucent and dripping black tears. The air turned ice cold. The woman opened her mouth, but instead of a scream, there was a low mechanical groan like a voice dragged through static. "You came to help," it said in a dozen overlapping tones. "Stay, and help us all." Evelyn stumbled back, her flashlight flickering. "Caleb, what is this?" He took a slow step forward. "They only want to be remembered." Suddenly, the heavy chapel doors slammed shut behind her. Boom, echoing through the space. Her flashlight died. For a moment there was nothing, just the sound of her heartbeat. Then, whispering. Hundreds of voices, too soft to understand, surrounding her, closing in. Evelyn pressed herself against the altar, trying to find her phone, but her hands shook too hard. The whispers grew louder, turning into cries, then laughter, then silence again. Somewhere in that dark sea of noise, she heard Caleb whisper, his voice different now, hollow, distant. "You shouldn't have come." And then the candles all relit themselves at once, bathing the chapel in a flickering, unnatural glow. Dozens of faces stared at her from the shadows, and every one of them looked like they'd been waiting a long, long time. Evelyn's pulse thundered in her ears as the candlelight danced across the chapel walls. The faces in the shadows stared with hollow, pleading eyes, men, women, children, all flickering like old film projections. Their mouths opened and closed, whispering words she couldn't understand. Please, one voice gasped. Don't forget us. Evelyn stepped backward until she hit the altar. Her trembling hand brushed against one of the scratched photographs, the same photo of the family she'd seen earlier. The gouges across their faces seemed deeper now, as if clawed from the inside. Caleb, she whispered, searching for him. He stood near the pews, his head bowed, arms limp at his sides. The candlelight painted his face in golden shadow. When he looked up, tears streaked down his cheeks, and though they weren't tears at all, they were black, thick like oil. They never left, Evelyn, he said quietly. They've been waiting. Every night at this hour, 2:47, the moment between life and what comes after. They reach out, hoping someone remembers. She shook her head. You need help. You're not making sense. Caleb took a slow step forward, his expression filled with sorrow. You think you stopped that crash years ago, don't you? The one on this road. You pulled people from that burning car. You saved them. Evelyn froze. The memory crashed through her like a wave. The flashing lights, the screams, the fire. A husband and wife in a twisted wreck. A boy in the back seat. She'd been the first to reach them. I tried, she said hoarsely. I couldn't save them all. Caleb's voice broke. That's why they can't rest. You remember the living, but not the dead. The candle flames flared, stretching high into the air. The walls began to hum, vibrating with low guttural tones. Outside, the forest howled. Wind, rain, and something else, something older. Evelyn pressed her palms over her ears. Stop it, please. But the voices only grew louder. Help us. Remember us. See us. The scratched photographs lifted from the altar, swirling in the air around her like leaves caught in a storm. The faces, once erased, began to reappear, slowly, painfully. Evelyn fell to her knees. What do you want from me? From the dark, the woman's ghost stepped forward. The same face Evelyn had seen before. She was dressed in soaked Sunday clothes, her hair floating like she was underwater. Her voice echoed in a chorus of others. You saw us die, but you never came back. Tears stung Evelyn's eyes. I couldn't face it again. The ghost surrounded her, whispering her name, reaching out. Every touch felt like frost biting her skin. Then Caleb's voice cut through the storm. You can set them free. Evelyn looked up. How? He pointed to the altar, to the burned-out candles and the old photographs. Say their names. Remember them. Give them light again. She hesitated, but then her voice cracked as she began. Lydia, Mark, Daniel. Each name she spoke made the chapel flicker brighter. The ghosts trembled, fading in and out of visibility. Caleb smiled softly through his tears. Keep going. Evelyn's voice grew stronger. I remember you. I remember your faces, your laughter, your lives. The candlelight exploded into blinding brilliance. One by one, the spirits lifted their faces, no longer twisted in agony but peaceful. They began to dissolve into light, drifting upward like smoke. Caleb looked down at himself, his body fading too. Evelyn's eyes widened. Caleb, you too? He smiled faintly. I was in that car too. Her heart broke. I'm sorry, he shook his head. You helped me remember who I was. Now it's time you go. The chapel's door creaked open on its own, the fog outside glowing pale white. As Caleb's figure vanished, his final whisper echoed through the air. The dead of night isn't for fear. It's for remembrance. Evelyn stumbled out into the dawn, trembling, tears mixing with rain. Behind her, the chapel collapsed silently into the earth, swallowed by the forest, as if it had never been there at all. The rain had stopped. A pale dawn crept slowly across the horizon, painting the world in washed-out shades of blue and gray. Evelyn stumbled along the muddy forest trail, soaked to the bone, her breath visible in the cold air. Every step felt heavier than the last, and like she was walking out of a dream that refused to let go. Behind her, the fog was thinning, curling away into the trees. When she turned to look for the chapel, it was gone. No cross, no candles, no trace of the clearing that had swallowed her whole. Only silence, deep and endless. She reached the road, boots squelching on the wet asphalt. Her car still sat there, engine off, headlights dim to dying yellow. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at her reflection in the rain-slick windshield. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door handle. The instant she touched it, her car radio turned on by itself. Static. Crackle. Faint music. Then a voice, soft, distant, almost gentle. "We are remembered." Evelyn froze. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "Caleb?" But the static faded. The music died. The radio went silent again. She sank into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel like a lifeline. The forest behind her felt impossibly still, as if it was finally resting. She took a deep breath, trying to ground herself, but her body was still trembling from everything she'd seen. She glanced at the clock. 2:47 a.m., her heart skipped a beat. It couldn't be. Dawn had already broken. The sun was rising, but the clock stayed frozen. 2:47, exactly the moment everything had begun. Evelyn stared at it until her eyes blurred with tears. Then the digital numbers blinked once and changed to 6:15 a.m. The first beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, warm and golden. It spilled across her hands, the dashboard, and the fog-soaked road ahead. For the first time, she didn't feel the weight of dread pressing down on her. Instead, she felt peace. She drove in silence. The forest slowly gave way to open fields and empty farmland. Birds began to sing in the distance, faint but real, a reminder that life, somehow, always found its way back. Hours later, Evelyn pulled into the hospital parking lot, the place where she'd spent countless nights saving lives. But today she didn't rush inside. She sat in her car, hands resting on the wheel, staring at the reflection of the rising sun in the rearview mirror. In her mind, she saw them, Lydia, Mark, little Daniel, smiling. Not as ghosts, not as horrors, but as people she once knew, finally at peace. She whispered softly, "You're remembered." A small smile touched her lips, but it faded as she caught sight of something on the passenger seat, a single photograph. Her breath hitched. It was the same family photo from the chapel, only this time the faces weren't scratched out. They were smiling back at her, vivid and alive, like nothing had ever happened. She turned it over. On the back in faded ink were 3 words, "Thank you, Evelyn." The air in the car grew still again. But this time the stillness wasn't menacing. It was calm, almost sacred. Evelyn started the car and pulled onto the open road. The world outside shimmered in morning light, and the lingering fog rose from the trees like smoke from a long extinguished fire. As she drove away, her reflection in the mirror seemed to flicker, just once. And for the briefest moment, she could swear she saw Caleb sitting in the back seat, smiling faintly. When she blinked, he was gone. Only the whisper of wind followed her down the road. The dead of night isn't about fear. It's about remembering the ones we left behind. And as the morning sun climbed higher, Evelyn Carter finally understood. Some hauntings don't come to scare us. They come to remind us we still have a heart.